Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, the creator and host of the award-winning podcast that you're listening to right now. Thank you so much, called Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. It is a daily podcast, 365 days a year, and each day we talk to an author about all of the things related to their career, their book, their life, and more in 30 minutes or less, because who has time? I am now an author myself, although I wasn't when I started this podcast, and you can get my new memoir, Bookends, a memoir of love, loss, and literature, wherever books are sold starting July 1st, and my children's book, Princess Charming. You can learn more about me at zibbyowens.com, but really you're here to learn more about the authors, and that is what we're going to do. Also, be sure to check out all the other podcasts in the Zcast Podcast Network. You can learn more at zcastnetwork.com and definitely check out those shows as well. I hope you'll all check out the all-new Zibby Mag, ZIBBY-MAG, the literary lifestyle destination with essays, book news, a lit lifestyle feature, and even some classes. Check it out, zibbymag.com. Jonathan Galassi is the author of School Days, a novel. He is the chairman of Farrar, Straus and Giroux. He is a former poetry editor for the Paris Review, a former chairman of the Academy of American Poets, and the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship for Poetry. His poems and essays have appeared in The New Yorker, New York Review of Books, Threepenny Review, and The Nation. He has published 3 books of poetry and translations of the poetry of Eugenio Montale, Giacomo Leopardi, and Primo Levi. His first novel, Muse, was published in 2015. Welcome, Jonathan. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss School Days.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled that you're here to talk with me.
Would you mind telling listeners what your book is about?
My book is about a boarding school, one of the old-fashioned historic boarding schools, and about the life of the students there back in the 60s when it was still all boys. And then you see the school evolve over time. And it's about the teachers at the school, too, and the kind of sacrifices they made and the how would you say, the issues that they faced in their life there.
Well, I found it fascinating, not only getting to know the teachers, but hearing about all the different boys, and you really developed so many different characters, and then watching as they develop over time, kind of getting the flash forward, if you will, when we get to revisit them again at the end, which was so interesting. I always love that kind of satisfaction that comes with like, but wait, what happens after this part of the story?
I always love that ending of a book when it says, so-and-so got divorced, so-and-so married. Yes, it's always it shows that the book has a life that continues after the pages, right?
Same in the movies, when they say something like in the type after 7 years later, blah, blah, blah. Then But anyway, so thank you for that. The book was really layered with, almost a coming of age tale, but also a sort of awakening of sexuality and how a bunch of different boys handled their feelings for each other, for women versus men, what they could express, what they fell into, how the teachers played into it, and then what they did with that information, because everybody handled it a little bit differently. Tell me more about all of that and the way that, the sexuality sort of is like the backdrop, like this umbrella that's hanging over the whole thing.
Well, it's about adolescence, right? And adolescents are pretty much the same today as they always have been, but the circumstances of in those days, boys and girls often were sent off to single-sex schools, and they were often sort of dropped there in September and picked up in June, not quite literally, but there was a lot less involvement on the point of from the point of view of the parents. There were no cell phones, no helicopter parents. It was a sort of world unto itself, this society of young boys who are having all sorts of sexual experiences, not necessarily with each other, but they're growing into their sexuality. And around them it's basically an all boys society. So there are various, the story shows the different boys having different reactions to that. They have girlfriends at home, they have girlfriends in the town, they have crushes on each other, etc. And I think it's a pretty accurate depiction of actually how kids at that age experience the need for closeness.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. This has been in the news a lot lately from different boarding schools, sort of one after the next, coming out with not just boarding schools either, but mostly what happens. I mean, the relationships between teachers and students, there's always been some mystery around that. And I feel like there's a scandal in many schools related to those dynamics. What was the timing of your deciding to write a book about this in relation to, like, was it inspired by real events going on, or as you were writing it, were you just like, oh my gosh, again and again and again? Like, how did it happen?
Well, that was certainly a factor in that a lot of, how would you say, things came out in the news about some of these schools, about where teachers had taken advantage of students or had relationships with them. And the schools in the old days had covered this up. And so there was a lot of people testifying. It's a little bit related to what's been going on in the church, of course. It was a very similar thing, where cones of silence were kind of breached, and all of a sudden there was a vision of what really went on. It's really, I actually think it's about power, that teachers are in loco parentis position, but they also they're looked up to by the kids, and they need some of them need the approbation and adoration of kids. And of course, that's probably based on their own unhappy backgrounds or character defects, So, but all these things play into how the teacher-student relationship is experienced in various different ways. And one of the paradoxes that I wanted to get into in the book is, how could someone be a great teacher and also have an inappropriate attachment to another kid? And that's one of the paradoxes of the teaching relationship. That, I mean, you see in the book, just like you see the boys having different relations, you see teachers having different ways of relating to students. Some of them are totally wonderful parental figures, very loving, trustworthy, with a sense of boundaries, and others are, there are a few who have boundary issues. And we see those different varieties. And we even see teachers who might have homosexual feelings themselves, but don't let those interfere with their teaching function. So there are all sorts of varieties of people, just like in life. People have different needs, different moral codes, different ways of experiencing that pedagogical, quasi-parental relationship.
I love the one field trip they went on to MoMA in New York City, the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, and how two of the boys, I always forget everybody's names, but how two of the boys were just like so cultured and blasé about it and could like rattle off the name of all the artists. And it was Sam, right, who was just like doe-eyed looking around like, this is the most amazing thing ever.
Sam he's sort of the ingenue, and he's less sophisticated than some of the other kids. Of course, he's the one who ends up being a teacher himself, and he's kind of the consciousness around which the book is organized.
Yes.
He watches all these things happen. He watches the teachers. He's not really a doer himself. He's a watcher.
Yeah. And the storyteller.
Right.
Can you tell me more about just to get off the book for 1 second, like about your storied career in publishing?
Well, I mean, I went to one of these schools and I decided afterwards that I didn't want to be an academic. I did love teaching. I had done some teaching, but I didn't go that direction. I decided to become an editor. And in a way, an editor is like a teacher, sort of counseling people, helping them to be the best they can be, etc. And that turned out to be a very rewarding profession for me. And I've done it for all my life, really. So, I've spent a lot of time with writers who, some of them are really great writers. And it's amazing to see what goes into making a great book, really.
What do you think goes into making a great book?
Well, it starts out with the character of the writer and their gift for expression. It's a sort of mixing of talent and character, I think. So that's sort of what you see in the book too. How do people blend their character with their personality, and their morals and their so that's I think that's how everything works in life. It's a mixture of self-restraint and also being able to access what you think and feel. That's what writers really, they have the gift of access. So that as a writer.
I haven't heard it said like that before. That's interesting.
But you have access to your deep feelings, your convictions, and that's what drives you to try to put it down on paper. So.
I said this recently, but my husband was asking me if I was going to write another memoir. And I was like, well, I've kind of not like a sweeping about my life thing, but maybe on a particular topic or something. I was like, I could probably write one about our dog, Naya. This is like the day before I adopted a puppy. But anyway, I was like, I could probably write it about Naya. And he's like, that's what's so crazy. Like, you could write a whole book about Naya. And if somebody asked me, how's everything going with Naya? I'd be like, pretty good.
Yeah, right. Well, that's why you're the writer and he's not.
I mean, he's wonderful. He's super sensitive and awesome, but he's not a writer. It's funny. It's funny.
It's just not everyone is. It's just something that. I mean, you could probably tell us about experiences you had that led you to be a writer. Things that happened maybe when you were a kid. Ways how you were rewarded by expression. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of what's led you to do what you're doing, don't you think?
Yeah, I do. In fact, so many of the authors I interview credit someone early on for recognizing talent, often a teacher. But there's somebody who says, wow, you really got something here. And that can change their entire life.
Well, that's what you see that in the book where the teacher knows what to say to the kid. Yep. To encourage them to move ahead, to encourage. Like, there's one thing in the book that actually came out of my own life where, the teacher says, well, you're not going to be a lawyer. You've got other things to do in life, and that did happen to me. And it was very liberating that, instead of doing what my father wanted me to do, I got to decide what I wanted to do. And the teacher was the one who gave me permission. And I think that's often true with writing too. They identify a gift or a direction. That's sort of the teacher's job in a way.
But you're the teacher and the student in this equation.
Yeah, I mean, students become teachers. Certain students become teachers because they were inspired by the teachers to emulate them. And that's part of the story too. It's like, it's something that's handed on. It's from one generation to another, I think.
Sure. So. I mean, your book also, it touched a lot on loyalty. I feel like loyalty, even in the Sam and Anne, I think her name is Anne's marriage, loyalty with some of the friendships to the teachers, between people who worked at the school and keeping secrets. And loyalty plays such a big role. I don't know. That was kind of a tangent, but it does. It's just.
Yeah, because loyalty is a representation of a mutual understanding. Right?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So, I love it.
Yeah.
You must get asked this all the time, but for writers who are starting out, going back to what we were saying about talent and mentorship and all of this, like sometimes people, and I am no expert at all, but I do say, like, it might be useful to find out if you are good at it. Like, because so many people love doing it, but like, get some impartial opinion of something. You just need someone to like vet it before you dedicate, endless time. Do you agree with that? Or
I mean, yes, I do. But the fact is, very few people are born great writers. There's a lot of 99% perspiration.
Yeah.
Right, to the 1% inspiration. It's not really that proportion, but you can start out with, I think a really great writer has something from the very beginning but you can turn out to be a very good writer by just applying yourself and keep it going. Mm-hmm. But yes, at a certain point, you need some sort of feedback about whether this is a good way of spending your time or not.
Yeah.
So, and you have to be honest with yourself too. You have to not be too hard on yourself. But if you're a writer, one thing you should be doing a lot of is reading mm-hmm. other people and seeing, well, does that sound like something that could have come out of me? Mm-hmm. Is there some correlation between what you love to read and what you're trying to write? I think that. Very true. Yes. Yeah. So what are you reading now? What am I reading right now? I'm reading Victory by Joseph Conrad. Yep. Which I've never read before. But, one thing in the book, you see Sam, the teacher, reading poems with a student, sort of indoctrinating the student on how to think about writing through reading these short texts. And that, I think that's what it's all about, really, is just getting them to really read. If you really read closely, if you really see what's going on, that can liberate you in your own writing. Yeah. Do you have another book in you? Another book coming or anything? I am working on something. It's a poetry thing, but I would like to write another novel, I think, or a memoir. I like what you've done, and I think I just don't know. I will definitely write something else. I've written 2 novels now, and there's something you can do in prose that you can't do in poetry. So I found it very, very fascinating to do the work. So love it. Well, it is interesting, this working in words world. Yeah. Well, you obviously enjoy it. Oh my gosh, I love it. I love to read. I love to write, but I love to read. What are you reading right now? Well, I just finished Tom Perrotta. Well, aside from your book, Tom Perotta's Tracy Can't Win, because I had him on earlier today. And what am I going to read for tomorrow? I have to look in my calendar. I've structured it so that my calendar is my reading list, and I don't have to ever debate. How many of these do you do in a day? In a day, I do between 8 to 12 a week. Really? Wow. But I take some weeks off. I try to. So then I have to double up other weeks. But on average, I usually do about 2 to 3 a day. Wow, that's incredible. That must be great fun. Oh my gosh, I learn so much. I'm constantly learning, and it's like being in the best English class forever. Well, you're lucky that you found that as a way of pursuing your interests in such a deep way. Yeah, it's been great. It's been such a gift. So, and I get to meet people like you, which is very interesting. Yes, I get to. Yeah, it's really fun. Well, thank you so much, Zibby. Thank you for coming on. Again, I hope. You too. All right, take care. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.